Hey folks, thank you for joining us today. My name is Derek Lalone. I'm one of the technology integration specialists here at the Mohawk Regional Information Center. And before we get started with today's presentation, I just want to do a quick review of some of the upcoming webinars that we have for the remainder of the summer. So I'm going to go ahead and transition over here. And first up, we have our webinars, or the YouTube live sessions, which is what you're participating in today. Today we have Start Writing with Google Keep. And as we go down the list, you can see on July 28th, we're holding a Using Technology for Authentic Assessments in the Elementary Classroom. On July 29th, we're doing Hacking G Suite with the Explorer tool. On August 18th, we are doing Digital Badging. And on August 21st, we are leveraging Nearpod in the classroom. And also, August 24th, creating a virtual classroom with Google Slides. So be sure to check those out. Next up, we have our virtual meetings. So those will be either conducted in Zoom or a Google Meet. So it'll be a little bit more of an interactive format for you to participate in. But on July 28th, we have Building Relationships with Students in an Online Environment. On July 30th, we have Motivating Students in an Online Environment. August 4th, Maximizing Virtual Manipulatives in Elementary Mathematics. And that kind of rounds up our virtual meetings. Finally, we have the online courses. So these are courses that are fully online for professional development. You can see we have quite a few that are ongoing already. And if we go into the upcoming ones, on July 27th, we have an online course, Motivating Students with Technology. And starting on August 11th, we have an online course called Google Sites More Than a Website. So those are our offerings that are coming up. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to fellow Model Schools Coordinator Chris Schaefer to talk about Google Keep.
Hello everyone, and welcome to today's session, Start Writing with Google Keep. I'm Chris Schaefer with the Mohawk Model Schools team, and I'm really excited to have the opportunity to share this awesome tool with you today. I think you will find this tool is great for both teachers and students, and it's quite versatile for a host of different ways that it can be used within the classroom. It can ease different workflows, especially when talking about student writing projects. Before we kick things off, I just want to remind everybody that if you would like to be marked as attending for today's session, you just need to enter your name into the chat over on the right-hand side of the video here on YouTube. I will be in the chat as well, watching for questions and comments as we go along, so feel free to type them there at any time. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and dive right in. I do want to start off with a quick outline for the topics we'll be discussing today. First, we'll just generate a very basic baseline of what I mean by the writing process. I know this is not new to any of you, but I just want to use this to highlight the use of Google Keep in different parts of the writing process later on. Next, we will discuss ways that Google Keep fits into a traditional writing workflow. And finally, we'll just share some extended tips for using Google Keep outside of the writing process. Since I love this tool so much, and I know it can be used in so many different ways, and I think you will as well. So first, let's create that baseline understanding of what I mean by the writing process. Note that for the purposes of the exercise today, I'm really going to use a very simple outline of what the writing process looks like. I know that in many cases, teachers like to promote that students will work in and out of these steps multiple times throughout a given writing assignment. But for the purposes of time and my own sanity for this exercise, I'm going to keep it simple with this fairly straightforward approach. Here you can see that we have the basics of the writing process: pre-writing, drafting, revision, and publishing. So what do I mean by those steps? First, let's talk about pre-writing. Obviously, this is the part of the writing process where you can quickly gather thoughts, information, resources, and start to just kind of analyze and process those into an argument or a process for the assignment. Next, with drafting, here you're actually going to be taking all the resources that you've gathered in the pre-writing step and put them into some sort of organized format, or your first draft of the writing assignment. Here you're going to be actually doing a bulk of the initial writing. However, this is one of the steps that students do often have to visit multiple times throughout a given assignment as they add or remove parts of their writing to create their argument. The next step is revision. Revision is always important in the writing process as you realize that things need to be changed, added, taken out. Here the author and other viewers can take the chance to correct simple grammatical errors, check the tone and the message of the piece, and just ensure that everything really makes sense for the given assignment. Finally, they can also take the chance to ensure that the author is correctly representing their argument throughout the piece. Finally, we'll talk about publishing. Here, basically what's going to happen is once the author's completed all the previous steps, they can, and sometimes more than once they've gone through those steps, they can take what they've created and make a final draft of the assignment. This could be for academic or professional review, or sometimes it's actually gone published out to a wider audience via the internet. This can take many different forms, whether it be a written paper, a website, sometimes even slide presentations like the one I have today, or a video. So we've talked about the writing process and what the basics looks like, but now let's talk about what that might actually look like in a classroom at any given time. So first, the teacher often creates guidelines for an assignment and gives the students a prompt. Students are then tasked based primarily individually to get started to go ahead and do some pre-writing. This can be done with pencil and paper, a Chromebook, tablet, laptop, whatever devices or medium you have in your classroom. And then they go ahead and write a draft. Sometimes there's some library or internet research mixed in there somewhere. Often revision comes in the form of a teacher or a peer review. And then publishing is simply turning that assignment into the teacher or to a group, or sometimes it's a presentation that's done to the class. All of this is just fine. I want to make sure that you understand I'm not trying to disparage the use of any of these mechanics in schools. I fully understand the need for students to practice processes many times over to create strong habits that will, of course, help them in their studies for years to come. The only thing I want to point out throughout this presentation is that now using tools like Google Keep, you can alter these processes a little bit and maybe open new opportunities for students to gather, analyze, and present arguments throughout their writing processes as they go forward. So let's talk a little bit about what Google Keep is and what it can do for you and your students. Google Keep in its most basic form is an app for taking down notes, storing ideas, creating checklists, and kind of organizing things. However, when you look deeper, you'll see that the tool can really help students organize their thoughts and arguments and can even be used in a collaborative way. So Google Keep is a website, but it also has a fully functioning Google Chrome extension, a mobile app for both Apple and Android devices, and it also works really well through integrations that they've made with other G Suite apps. And we'll go through some of those kind of as we go through the presentation. So how do you get to Google Keep? There are multiple methods to access the tool. One way is to simply type in the website keep.google.com. You can type that into any browser and get to Google Keep. You can also, like the little video showing you on the screen, click on the waffle or the app launcher and select Google Keep in the list of available apps on your G Suite account. This works on any device that you can sign into a Google account, whether it's a Chrome device or a laptop, Chromebook, whatever. So that's just nice that it's there. So let's take a few minutes now to jump right out and look at Google Keep kind of in a live drive demonstration so we can look at the tool and some of the features of it. So here we are on the Google Keep homepage for my account. Here you can see a few things in the interface that I'll kind of explain here. Down the left-hand side, these are what's known as different labels you can apply to your notes. We'll get into those in a second. It's basically a way you can organize them. Across the top, you'll see a search bar. So once you've created a bunch of Google Keep notes, it'll be easy for you to find any of them at any time by doing a quick search. You'll also see at the top a quick and easy way that you can create new notes. So this is just a nice simple interface where you can just quickly click on that. You'll also see I have some notes that I've already created here. So those are all the notes that I've created, just like Google Drive, will show up here as their own individual tile. Across the top, you can see that we do have a few options for things like the settings. You can also change it from this tiled view into a list view. I just happen to like the tiled view better. And there is a refresh option, which sometimes comes in handy if you're working with both your laptop or Chromebook or your teacher device, desktop maybe, and your phone. And I'll get into that in a second. Sometimes you'll have to refresh the page just for things to appear on both devices. So they put a button for that right within the interface here. So let's quickly just kind of talk about how to create Google Keep notes and what the options are within them. So if I click to create a note, I can easily see here the options that I have for this individual Keep note. So here I can give it a title. So I'm going to call this Assignment 1 Notes. And I'm going to say for my note, text, text, text. So I can simply type into the note a title and the main part of the note that I'd like to have shown. I can also easily turn on checkboxes. So if I want to create a list instead of just having text, all I have to do is click on these three dots, the More menu. And one of the options is to show checkboxes. So now I'm creating a list or a checkbox list. So I have my first note, first item there, text, text, text. And then I can say revise. And I could say publish. So that's 3 quick checklist items that I entered. You'll notice also when I started to type into the note, I got some more options along the bottom of the note here. So one of them, the first one, is to remind me. So if you're creating, for example, a to-do list here in Keep, you can create a reminder which will remind you at any given time that you'd like to program. You can also tell it to remind you when you get to a specific location. So let's say you want it to remind you when you get to work that you have to go and visit your principal. You can say, remind me at work, as long as you've entered that into your Google Maps. You may have to enter that manually if it's not there. You can also simply pick a time, date and time, and a place at the bottom for that reminder. So if I select the date and time, I can select any date I want, any time I want, and you could even set it to repeat if you'd like. So every Monday, you need a reminder to refresh your whiteboard for the week. You could simply do a reminder here and Keep for that. Once I save that, now it's got a reminder set to it for tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Some further options I have within the Keep note here is I can add a collaborator. So let's say I'm a student working in a group on a project and we're taking notes, we're just getting started. I can actually add my classmates in as collaborators on this individual Keep note. So it works just like Google Docs and Slides and all the other G Suite tools, where now multiple students can access the same note. They can all add, edit, revise information that's there, and now they're working together in a common source rather than individually on their own. To do that, you simply click on the collaborator and type in a name, and that person would come up and you would just select them and save. So now I've shared this note with my colleague, Derek. You can also, if you're a very visual person, organize your Keep by adding colors to the notes. So let's say for this assignment 1 note, I want to add the yellow background. All I do is select the color, and now when I look in my list of notes, it'll be easier for me to find because I know visually I'm looking for yellow. You also have the option to add images. So images, and I'll get into this a little more in depth in a bit, are nice because you can not only take the notes that you need for this assignment, But if you find a useful image as you're working along, you can add that. If you're working on, let's say, a phone, you can simply go ahead and take a picture on your phone and upload that into Google Keep on the app on your phone. And that's a quick way that you can have access to those pictures later on in the writing process, just by quickly snapping a picture of it while you're taking your notes. The last option here is to archive. So if you've completed the use of this note and you're ready to move on, you can click archive, and it then takes it out of your active list of Google Keep notes. We did have a couple other options in the More menu. You do have the option to delete them. You can also add a label. So when we first jumped into Google Keep, I mentioned that there's a bunch of labels down the left here. As you use Google Keep more, if you use the labels feature, your list can be quite long, but you can add labels to your notes to organize them. That's nice because let's say I have a list of US history notes. I can filter out through my entire Google Keep library and only see my US history notes just by clicking on it over here on the left. So that's kind of like the Google Classroom Topics feature, works in a very similar way. You also have the option to add a drawing. So if I close the note that I'm working on, you'll notice that I have a note here that I actually wrote on my phone using the Google Keep app using the draw feature. So instead of typing a note or taking a picture, you can also just quickly draw a picture or write text onto the note, just like I did here. Let me open up my assignment 1 note again. You have the option to make a copy of a note as you're working along. So if this is your assignment 1 notes, you want to use this for assignment 2 as well, you can quickly make a copy. You can hide those checkboxes if you don't want to use them any longer. Or you can copy this Keep note directly into a Google Doc. I'll show you how to do that a different way later, but this is one way that you can insert what you're doing in Google Keep directly into Google Docs. So that's kind of the basic options within a Keep note. If I close this up, there's a couple other things that I want to show you about Google Keep. So you'll notice, for example, on some of my notes, I have multiple labels applied. So if you do have an item that crosses multiple labels, you can apply as many as you want. And then when you filter later on, it will show up if you click on any of those labels. So that's a nice feature to have. Another thing that I like to point out is that if you do have a shared or a collaborative note, you'll notice that it will appear a little bit differently than a note that's just for yourself, in that it will show that person's little Google avatar on the note. And if you hover over it, it will tell you who that person is. So if this were shared with 5 people, I could see all 5 here, but that icon will show on any shared notes. You'll also notice that if you insert any hyperlinks as text, it will actually be a clickable link here in Google Keep. So as students do research, or if you as a teacher are collecting some resources to use in the classroom, you can insert links as well and then just simply click on them later on. So that's kind of the basics of what Google Keep, the functions of it are. You can create a note, you can create a checklist, add images. One last thing I do want to point out here is there's in this note, I took a picture from the News Channel 9 website. And this is the weather for this week. And what it is just text on a website. One feature that's really, really cool about Google Keep is if you take pictures of text and put them into a Keep note, there's an option in the More menu to grab the image text. So there's like an AI in the background that sees the images you're putting into Google Keep. If it recognizes that there's text in the image, you get this option in the More menu. And what that does now is it inserts what it sees as text in the picture as editable text down below in the note. So now you have, excuse me, some text that you can quickly copy and paste out of, or I'll show you in a minute how to quickly get that into Google Docs. And now that's no longer just a picture you're pulling in, it's actually text. And that's a really powerful tool for students. Of course, you'll want to encourage that they're citing sources still and using this appropriately. But in some cases, this can be a tool that can really save some time and make sure that they're getting the highest quality sources within their writing possible. So one thing that I do want to point out is when you are creating notes, I showed you how to click into the note and simply type. If I close this, there is a quick way to just create a new list. Instead of having to click on the More menu, if you just click New List, it automatically pops up with the checkboxes. There's also the drawing, so create a new note from drawing. So now it opens up a full drawing thing. Of course, I have my mouse, so this is not going to be great, but I could draw anything I wanted here, and it would show up in the note. And I just click back to get back to my notes. So now I have my circle. And then the last option is a new note with a picture. So this, because I'm on my laptop, would let me take a picture from the laptop and upload it into Google Keep and then create a note based on that. You'll notice too, as I'm working along, I was making changes. This refresh icon actually changes and it shows like a little cloud. And then once all your changes are saved to your Google account, the cloud gets a check mark on it. So if you see that refreshing in the background, that's all that's happening. It's saving to your Google account so that you can access these now on all of your devices. One last feature here within the Keep interface that I want to point out is you'll notice I have a couple of notes that are at the top and they're listed under what's called pinned. So if you have some notes that you want to use all the time in Google Keep, and you want them to always appear at the top of the list, what you can do is you can go down into your list of notes, and let's say I want to take my Channel 9 one that I showed you before. Actually, let's use the assignment one. If I click on the More menu for that option, excuse me, not the More menu, the top right corner has the push pin icon. If I click on the push pin, now that's a pinned note that appears at the top of my list of Google Keep notes. Now I can access that at any time. And if I decide later on I don't want it to be at the top of my list, I simply re-click on that push pin and it unpins it from the top of the list. So it's a really, really handy tool for you as a teacher and for your students as well as they're working. Sometimes this list can get really, really long, just like a Google Drive can get really confusing if you're not organizing things into folders. So one way to kind of organize that and keep your most pertinent things at the top is to use that pin feature. So next I want to quickly jump over into Google Docs, and I want to show you how to take something that you've done in Google Keep and bring it into Google Docs. So if I go to my drive, I'm going to create a new Google Doc. So you'll notice when I'm in Google Docs, I'll give this a name first. So this is my Keep webinar sample doc. Trying to keep myself organized in Drive. One of the things you'll notice in Google Docs that they changed, I think it was sometime last year, is they added some cross app integrations for some of the tools within G Suite that you'll need to use not just in their standalone app, but you can also use in other apps. So Google Keep is one of those items. On the right-hand side of the screen, when you're in Google Docs, you have this sidebar with Google Calendar, Google Keep, Tasks. You may see a couple of other ones depending on what your G Suite administrator has done with your domain. But if I click on Google Keep, now this sidebar kind of expands, and you'll see my notes in Google Keep now appear here in my Google Doc. To get these notes and use them into my doc, I can do a couple of different things. If I only want part of a note, like for example, if I'm reading a student's essay as a teacher and I have a bank of comments saved as a note, I can simply highlight part of the note by clicking into it and then highlighting, and I can copy that, and I could then insert a comment in that student's essay and paste my comment in. So this would be a great way for you to save time if you're reading dozens of student writing assignments and you're trying to grade them, you can have your grading comments that you're going to use, all those common comments that you have to use across different essays, saved in a note, and then simply copy just that one comment you want to use for that student into a comment within their Google Doc. The other option you have is I can take an entire note and drop it right into my doc. So if I scroll down, for example, let's start with this assignment 1 notes note. I can now take that and just drag it into my screen, and now it takes that note and converts it into text on the page. So now I have the title is the main line, and my checkboxes turn into bullet points within the text. Now that's fully editable. I don't have to leave it as it was in Google Keep. I can make changes here. That's not going to sync back to Google Keep. Basically, once you take it and put it into the doc, now it's just part of the doc. But it's a great way for you to kind of quickly take something that you've saved as a note and drop it into a doc. For students, if we're kind of going back to this idea of students using Google Keep within the writing process, they could use Google Keep for that first step of the brainstorming and pre-writing, where they're gathering all the resources, they're typing all their notes, they're getting images, they're saving citations. All they have to do to get those into the document that they're now typing up is to either highlight that text or take the entire note and drop it into the doc. And now they're already moving into the step 2 where they're creating that first draft. So it's really, really simple. It's a great plugin. If you do, by the way, have images saved in Keep like this one here, if you drag that into Google Docs, it just inserts the image. Now I was in a bulleted list, so I added it as a bullet. Let me undo. I'm going to move down and I'll just put it in as its own item. Once that's into Docs, now I can resize it if I need to. So I don't want that to take up the whole page. I'm just going to resize it. I can also, once I've clicked on a picture in Docs, you do have the ability to change how the text wraps around that picture. And then you can also do some basic adjustments. This is things like they do have some recoloring options. So if you want it to be like a really standout coloring, there are also, you can make it more transparent or less transparent. Just some basic touch-up options. So that's a great way to get from Google Keep those images that you've taken and pop them in, or your students, if they're taking images as they're doing research and gathering resources, now they can quickly drop those right here into their doc. Now there was the other image that I had of the text from Channel 9 in a note. If I click on that note, remember I was able to tell Google Keep to pull the text out of that image. Now I can quickly highlight some of that text, copy it, and I could go into my essay or my writing assignment, and I can paste that in. So that's a great way that students could grab, they could take pictures of a book and grab a citation out of that, that picture. So it's a great way for them to just quickly gather that rather than trying to read it, retype it. They can just take a quick picture and move on, and then they're just continuing to move through that writing process in a more efficient way. So that's kind of the crux of how the Google Keep plugin within Docs works. Now you'll notice that I'm in Google Docs. That plugin also exists in a slide deck. So if they're working in Google Slides to create a presentation, they also have the Google Keep option within Slides. So if they've done their background research and gathered their resources, started to create some ideas, again, the same options that we had in Docs, they can use right here within Slides. So they could click into a note and highlight some of it and copy and paste it into their presentation. Or again, if they had an image, they could just take that and drop it into, they can drop that into the presentation as well. So that cross-app integration that they created for the basic ones would be Calendar, Keep, and Tasks. But obviously we're talking about Google Keep, really allows students to be more efficient in how they get through the steps of the writing process. So now that we've looked at the features of Google Keep and learned about how it works and how it plugs into other Google apps, let's revisit the writing process steps that we discussed earlier and kind of think of how we can enhance the student's writing experience going forward. So first, let's talk about pre-writing. So Google Keep is literally a tool made to help with organizing thoughts and ideas into a simple to understand format. With Keep, students can easily create notes or checklists, save pictures, and even create works cited entries as they brainstorm and gather those resources. And then Keep will make sure that things stay organized and easy to find later on. No more messy notebooks, no more flashcards that get lost on the bus or in the backpack. No more my dog ate my paper. Now it's all organized right within Keep. Next is the drafting step. Here students can easily use Keep to move their ideas into the G Suite app of their choice by using the simple plugins Google has created to access Keep across all of their products. While revising, students, teachers, and peers can collaboratively take notes in Keep to ask for changes, to create a new direction for the piece, or even just to simply house a bank of comments that can be used when grading docs. There aren't too many uses for Keep in the publishing or the final draft of a writing assignment, but students will have a much easier time staying organized and efficient if they integrate Keep throughout the writing process within a given assignment. So in some cases, you could argue that students would struggle to even get to the publishing step without having used Keep along the way. Before we kind of close out for today, I do want to share with you a few other ways that Google Keep can be used. There's literally thousands of ways that people have shared on the internet for using Google Keep in really creative and fun ways. If you've used Keep personally in the past in a fun or creative way, please take a second to share it with the group here in the chat on the video. But in the meantime, I do want to share just a couple of ways that I think Google Keep is a really powerful and important tool to use going forward. So the first one is, like I showed you in the features demonstration, the grabbing of text out of an image. With the AI built into the app, it basically allows you to take a picture, put it into Keep, and then Keep will recognize that there's text in that image, and then you can simply take it right out, and now you have editable text that you can use in any format you want. It's a wonderful feature that definitely has not gotten enough fanfare, if you ask me. Next, kind of on a more practical note, think of all the times you've spent whipping up wonderful instructional examples on the whiteboard only to have to erase them and lose them forever. Now using Google Keep, you can easily take a picture of the whiteboard using your app on your mobile device, your Chromebook, or your laptop, and save those notes as long as you want. You can even share them with your students right through Google Keep so they have those notes going forward as they think about completing other assignments. The final one that I like to share with teachers is what I mentioned again in the features demonstration, is creating a custom comment bank within Keep that you can then easily use for student writing assignments moving forward. It can be a super time saver for you when you're reading dozens of essays at a time. Don't forget that once you put in the time to create this note just once, you can use it forever on all writing assignments moving forward. So it can really help you crush those Google Classroom assignments in no time. Well, that about does it for today. Thank you all for spending some time with me exploring the uses of Google Keep. I hope this session helped you learn something new, and I really hope it helps you or your students as you work through writing assignments this year. I'm going to stick around in the chat a few minutes if anyone has questions or comments. You can also feel free to email me anytime, cschaefer@moric.org, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have in a more one-on-one format if you prefer that. Don't forget to visit moric.org/PD for more sessions in the coming weeks. Have a wonderful day, and thank you again for joining us for today's Moric Summer PD session.